Research centers study human crowdfunding because it enables innovation. Part 1. Dr. N stared at the data on his screen for the third time that morning. Something was wrong. The numbers didn't make sense according to any model the Consortium for Technological Advancement had developed in 10,000 years of studying civilizations across countless dimensions. A human had just invented a new water purification system. That part wasn't unusual. What made Doctor and Scales ripple with confusion was how the human had funded it. The inventor had no family wealth, no corporate backing, no government grant, no guild membership. According to every economic model in the consortium's database, this human should not have been able to build anything more complex than a simple tool. Yet here was the evidence. In 30 days, 47,000 other humans had voluntarily given this inventor small amounts of their currency. Strangers, people who had never met the inventor and never would. They had simply read a description of the idea and decided to help make it real. The project had reached full funding in 42 days. Dr. N ran the calculations again. The probability of this occurring by chance was so small that his computer initially flagged it as a data corruption error. But the evidence was there in humanity's digital networks, plain as day. Thousands of similar cases. A teenager creating a neural interface for disabled people. A small team developing revolutionary battery technology. A grandmother designing sustainable housing. In every case, strangers gave money to help strangers build things that might never work. He called his research partner, Agent L, who specialized in economic anthropology. She arrived at his lab within minutes, her tentacles curling with curiosity. "Look at this," Dr. N said, pulling up a human website. The screen showed hundreds of projects, each asking for funding from the general public. They call it crowdfunding. Instead of going through official channels, humans simply ask other humans to support their ideas. And it works. Elle's eyes widened as she scrolled through the projects. A musician wanted to record an album. An engineer planned to build a new kind of wheelchair. A group of students hoped to send a satellite into space. Some projects asked for a few thousand units of human currency. Others asked for millions. All of them had received at least some funding from ordinary people. "This shouldn't be possible," Elle whispered. "The use centralized planning committees. The rely on hereditary guild systems. The corporate collective controls all major innovation through millennium-old corporations. Every successful civilization we've studied controls innovation from the top down. It's the only way to ensure resources go to worthy projects." "I know," Dr. N replied. "But humans don't do that. They let anyone try. Anyone with an idea and the ability to explain it can potentially access resources from their entire species." They spent the next several hours reviewing case after case. The pattern held. Humans were funding innovation in a way that every principle of economics the consortium had established. What made it more disturbing was how well it worked. Human technological advancement had accelerated dramatically in recent decades, coinciding with the rise of this crowdfunding phenomenon. Dr. N pulled up a comparison chart. In the same time period that the Central Innovation Committee had approved and funded 3 major projects, humans had crowdfunded over 47,000 projects. Not all of them succeeded. In fact, many failed. But the sheer volume meant that even with a high failure rate, humans were producing more innovation than civilizations that had existed for millions of years. "We need to report this to the council," Elle said, her voice shaking slightly. "This could change everything we understand about innovation economics." The emergency session of the consortium's Council of Observers convened 3 days later. Representatives from dozens of research centers across multiple dimensions gathered in the Great Hall, their forms varying wildly from crystalline beings to energy clouds to corporeal species like Dr. N's people. The head of the council, Observer Prime, called the meeting to order. His ancient form, over 3 million years old, radiated authority. Doctor and has submitted a report that requires immediate attention. He claims to have discovered a fundamentally new innovation funding model, one that challenges our core understanding of economic development. Doctor and activated the holographic display. Images of human crowdfunding campaigns filled the chamber. What you're seeing is a species that has democratized innovation itself. They have removed institutional gatekeepers almost entirely from the early stages of development. Impossible, declared the observer, a being of pure logic housed in a crystalline matrix. Without proper oversight, resources would be wasted on frivolous or impossible projects. The failure rate would make the entire system unsustainable. The failure rate is approximately 60%, Doctorin confirmed. But humans don't seem to care. They view failed innovation as valuable data rather than wasted resources. They have a saying, fail fast, fail often. They celebrate instructive failures almost as much as they celebrate successes. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The concept of celebrating failure was alien to most civilizations present. Failure meant wasted resources, lost time, diminished prestige. It was something to be avoided through careful planning and committee oversight. Observer Prime raised one appendage for silence. Explain the mechanism. How do humans decide which projects to fund? That's what makes it so chaotic, Elle said, stepping forward. There's no central decision-making body. Each individual human decides for themselves. They base their decisions on factors we find difficult to quantify: passion, belief, trust in a stranger's vision, social connections, excitement about possibilities. Sometimes they fund projects knowing they might fail simply because they want to see if the idea could work. A representative, adorned in traditional merchant guild symbols, spoke up. This sounds like madness. How can untrained individuals possibly judge the merit of complex technological proposals? They lack the expertise, the experience, the proper credentials. Doctorin displayed another chart. Collectively, they don't. The wisdom emerges from the crowd itself. If an idea resonates with enough people, it gets funded. If it doesn't, it fails. The system is self-correcting through distributed decision-making, and somehow it produces results faster than any centralized system we've documented. What are the social implications? Asked an observer, representing a civilization where corporate entities had existed longer than most species. Does this not create instability, economic chaos? Surprisingly, no, Elle answered. It creates something else. A culture where innovation is expected from everyone, not just elite institutions. Where a teenager in a garage has almost the same chance of bringing an idea to life as an established corporation. Where failure doesn't end a career, it simply becomes part of the learning process. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were looking at a species that had fundamentally restructured how innovation worked, not through some grand plan or careful policy, but through millions of individual humans making small decisions to trust each other with their resources. Observer Prime's voice carried a weight that made everyone pay attention. If this analysis is correct, humanity represents a potential disruption to the galactic order. A species that innovates this efficiently will rapidly advance beyond civilizations that have existed for eons. We need to understand this thoroughly. He turned to Dr. N and L. I'm authorizing the largest study in consortium history. I want teams embedded in human society. I want every aspect of this crowdfunding phenomenon documented and analyzed. I want to know if this is a temporary cultural quirk or a genuine competitive advantage. Doctorin felt his scales tingle with excitement and apprehension. This was the kind of assignment that defined careers, or ended them if the findings were too controversial. We'll need extensive resources, he said. Human society is complex. Their internet alone contains more information than some species generate in. You'll have whatever you need, Observer Prime replied. Because if we're right about this, humanity isn't just another species to catalog. They're a potential threat to every established civilization that relies on traditional innovation models. As the council adjourned, Elle pulled up one more human crowdfunding project on her portable display. A 12-year-old girl was trying to raise money to build a robot that could clean ocean plastic. She had already received donations from 2,847 people across 6 continents. Many donors had left messages of encouragement. Some had offered technical advice. Others had simply said they believed in her dream. "Look at this," Elle said quietly. "A child, with no credentials, no institutional backing, no approval from any authority, and thousands of adults are giving her real money to pursue her idea, not because they expect a return on investment, but because they want to live in a world where children's dreams can become real." Doctor and studied the project for a long moment. That's what we're really trying to understand, isn't it? Not the mechanics of crowdfunding, but why a species would build a system that values the dreams of strangers. Yes, Elle agreed, and whether that makes them stronger or more vulnerable, because hope can be a powerful force, but it can also be a dangerous one. They left the council chamber knowing their research would shake the foundations of civilization. Humanity had found a way to weaponize collective optimism. The question was whether other species could replicate it, or whether this was something uniquely human, something that came from a species young enough to still believe that impossible simply meant nobody had tried hard enough yet. Part 2. Agent L adjusted her holographic disguise one more time before stepping into the coffee shop. To human eyes, she appeared as an ordinary woman in business casual attire, someone who might work in marketing or design. No one could see the sophisticated scanning equipment woven into the fabric of her false skin, or the neural recorder capturing every conversation within a 30-meter radius. She had been living among humans for 3 months now, and the experience had been unsettling in ways she hadn't anticipated. The consortium's briefing materials had prepared her for human physical appearance, social customs, and basic psychology, but nothing had prepared her for the sheer enthusiasm humans displayed when talking about ideas. The coffee shop was hosting a meetup for crowdfunding creators. Elle had found it listed on one of the thousands of human websites dedicated to connecting people with shared interests. 15 humans sat around a large table, laptops open, talking over each other with an energy that would have seemed aggressive in most species, but apparently passed for normal human conversation. "The trick is telling a story," said a young man who had successfully funded a documentary about urban farming. "People don't back projects, they back dreams. You have to make them see what the world could be like if your idea succeeds. But be honest about the risks," added a woman who had funded 3 different technology projects. "Humans respect transparency. Tell them what could go wrong. Tell them you might fail. They'll appreciate it more than a perfect pitch." Elle recorded every word while sipping her coffee, a beverage she had learned to tolerate if not enjoy. The conversation touched on technical aspects of running a campaign, but kept returning to emotional elements. Passion, authenticity, connection, words that didn't translate well into consortium economic models. A man in his 60s who had funded a project to bring clean water to remote villages leaned back in his chair. "I failed my first 2 campaigns, lost money on both, but I learned more from those failures than I ever learned in business school. And the people who backed me, most of them said they were glad they took the chance, even though I didn't deliver. They called it educational." "Educational failure," Elle murmured, making a note. The concept still baffled her superiors when she submitted her reports. In her civilization, failure meant disgrace, resource waste, and career termination. Here, humans discussed their failures over coffee like war stories, each one a badge of honor proving they had tried. After the meetup, Elle returned to her apartment, really a monitoring station disguised as a modest 1-bedroom rental. Dr. N was waiting for her in holographic form, his image projected from the consortium research vessel hidden in Earth's asteroid belt. "What did you learn?" he asked. Elle began her report. Humans don't separate innovation from emotion. For most species we study, innovation is a logical process. You identify a problem, allocate resources, follow a procedure, achieve a result. Humans approach it differently. They innovate because they feel something, because they're angry about a problem, or excited about a possibility, or hopeful about a future they can imagine. "That seems inefficient," Doctrine observed. "That's what I thought," Elle replied. "But it's not. The emotional investment creates something the logical approach doesn't: persistence. When a human truly believes in an idea, they keep trying even when the rational choice would be to quit. And that persistence often leads to breakthroughs that careful planning would never find." She pulled up her latest data analysis. "I've been tracking successful projects. The ones that get funded have certain characteristics. They tell compelling stories. They show vulnerability. They invite backers to be part of something bigger than themselves. It's not just a transaction, it's a relationship." Doctor and studied the data with visible fascination. "This goes beyond economics. This is social bonding through collaborative creation." "Exactly," Elle confirmed. "I attended a project fulfillment party last week. A creator who had successfully built a new kind of bicycle lock invited all her local backers to celebrate. They weren't investors demanding returns. They were friends celebrating a shared victory. Many of them had never met before backing the project. The project had created a community." Over the next several weeks, Elle and dozens of other embedded agents documented hundreds of crowdfunding campaigns across every sector of human innovation. The patterns they discovered challenged fundamental assumptions about how civilizations advance. Agent L, embedded in a human technology hub, reported on a 17-year-old who had developed a new solar panel design in her garage. The design wasn't perfect. Professional engineers identified several flaws, but 3,200 humans had funded her prototype anyway, not because they expected perfection, but because they wanted to encourage a young person pursuing clean energy. The teenager used the feedback from both backers and critics to refine her design. Her second iteration was remarkable. Her third might actually revolutionize solar power. "She never would have gotten institutional funding," Elle noted in his report. "She's too young, too inexperienced, lacks credentials. But crowdfunding doesn't care about credentials. It cares about potential." Agent Ra, studying agricultural innovation, sent a report that made the research team question their instruments. A collective of farmers had developed agricultural drones that could plant and monitor crops with unprecedented efficiency. The remarkable part wasn't the technology. It was who had funded it. City dwellers. People who had never farmed, would never farm, and gained no direct benefit from the innovation. They funded it because they believed sustainable farming mattered for humanity's future. "This violates basic economic self-interest," Ra wrote. "These humans spent their limited resources on something that doesn't benefit them personally. When I asked them why, they looked at me like I was stupid." One said, "Because we all eat food and we should all care about where it comes from." The concept of indirect benefit through species-wide improvement seems natural to them. Doctor and compiled these reports with growing concern. Each one revealed the same pattern. Humans had built an innovation system that ran on something other than profit motive or institutional mandate. It ran on collective belief in the future. But not every report was positive. Agent L documented the dark side of the system: projects that took money and delivered nothing, scams designed to exploit human optimism, creators who promised the impossible and crashed into reality. The failure rate was real. For every success story, there were multiple failures. Yet somehow, this didn't destroy the system. Humans developed their own defenses. They shared information about dishonest creators. They learned to spot red flags. They accepted that some failures were inevitable costs of innovation. The community self-corrected without central authority. Elle attended a gathering where a creator apologized to her backers for failing to deliver her promised product. The woman stood before 50 people who had given her money and admitted defeat. Elle expected anger. In most civilizations, such a public failure would result in social exile at minimum. Instead, the backers applauded. They thanked her for trying. Several offered advice for her next attempt. One man said he backed projects knowing half would fail because the half that succeeded more than made up for it. Another woman said she viewed her backing as a vote for the kind of world she wanted to live in, not an investment expecting guaranteed returns. This is beyond economics, Elle reported to Doctor that night. This is philosophy. Humans have collectively decided that the right to try is more important than the guarantee of success. They've built an entire economic system around that belief. The research team's most shocking discovery came from Agent R, who was studying human response to failed innovation. He had tracked 500 crowdfunding projects that failed to deliver. In 73% of cases, backers expressed gratitude for the attempt. They said things like, "I'm glad you tried," or "I learned something from following your process," or "At least now we know that approach doesn't work." R's report included extensive documentation because the reviewing committee initially flagged it as a translation error. The concept of thanking someone for wasting your money seemed logically impossible, but the evidence was clear. Humans viewed failed innovation as valuable data, not wasted resources. They understood on a fundamental level that progress required experiments, and experiments sometimes failed. Dr. N gathered all the reports and prepared his analysis for the consortium. The conclusion was inescapable. Human crowdfunding wasn't just an alternative funding mechanism. It was a completely different approach to innovation itself. One that valued speed over certainty, distributed decision-making over centralized control, and collective optimism over individual caution. The implications were staggering. Every civilization the consortium had studied limited innovation through gatekeepers, committees that evaluated proposals, corporations that controlled funding, guilds that restricted access to resources. These gatekeepers ensured that only worthy projects received support. They minimized waste. They maintained quality standards. They protected their civilizations from bad ideas. But they also slowed everything down. A project might wait years for approval. Good ideas died in committee. Innovation came from the top down, sanctioned by those already in power. Humans had eliminated most of the gatekeepers. The crowd itself decided what deserved support. This meant more failures, yes. More wasted resources, more broken promises, more disappointments. But it also meant more attempts, more experiments, more chances for breakthrough discoveries. It's a trade-off, Dr. N explained to Elle as they reviewed the data. Traditional systems minimize failure but also minimize attempts. Human crowdfunding maximizes attempts and accepts higher failure rates. The question is which approach produces more total innovation. Elle pulled up the comparative data. The answer was clear. In every sector they studied, humans were innovating faster than comparable civilizations using traditional methods, not because each human innovation was superior, but because humans tried so many more things. They threw ideas at the wall until something stuck, then refined what worked. They've weaponized acceptable failure, Elle said softly. They've created a cultural immune system that can survive setbacks and keep trying. Most civilizations can't do that. Dr. N saved the final report with a sense of foreboding. This information would change how the consortium viewed humanity. The question was whether it would lead to cooperation or conflict. Because a species that could innovate this efficiently was a species that would rapidly advance beyond ancient civilizations that moved at a more measured pace. Part 3. The Great Chamber of the Council was filled to capacity. Representatives from 247 civilizations had gathered to hear Dr. and present his findings. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation and tension. Word had spread that the report on humanity would be controversial. Observer Prime called the assembly to order. His 3 million-year-old consciousness filled the space with gravitas. We have before us the final report on human crowdfunding. This phenomenon has been studied extensively by our most skilled researchers. Dr. N, present your conclusions. Dr. N activated the holographic display. Earth appeared in the center of the chamber, rotating slowly. Data streams surrounded it, showing the flow of human innovation over the past century. Humanity has discovered something we missed, he began. In 10,000 years of studying civilizations across countless dimensions, we believed we understood the optimal path for innovation: careful planning, institutional oversight, resource allocation by qualified experts. Every successful civilization we studied followed this model. He paused, letting the chamber absorb his words. We were wrong, or rather we were incomplete. There is another way, a way we never considered because it seemed too chaotic to work. The display changed, showing thousands of human crowdfunding campaigns, success and failures alike, spreading across the globe in real time. Humans have democratized innovation. They've removed institutional gatekeepers from the early stages of development. Any human with an idea and the ability to communicate it can potentially access resources from their entire species. The ambassador, a being of pure crystalline logic, spoke first. This chaos cannot produce consistent results. Without proper oversight, resources are wasted on impossible projects. Your own data shows a 60% failure rate. This is unacceptable inefficiency. That's what we thought, Dr. N replied. But we were measuring the wrong thing. We focused on individual project success rates. We should have been measuring total innovation output. The display changed again, showing comparative data. In the time it took the Central Innovation Committee to approve 3 projects, humans crowdfunded 47,000. Even with a 60% failure rate, that means humans successfully completed approximately 19,000 innovations in the same period. Your 3 approved projects may have had higher success rates, but the total innovation output was orders of magnitude lower. The chamber erupted in debate. The High Merchant stood, her guild symbols shimmering with authority. These numbers must be inflated. Such rapid innovation is impossible without institutional control. Who ensures quality? Who prevents dangerous technologies? Who protects against wasted resources? Agent L stepped forward. The humans do, all of them. Quality emerges from the crowd itself. Projects that look suspicious don't get funded. Dangerous technologies face public scrutiny before they're built. Resources are distributed across thousands of small experiments rather than concentrated in a few large ones. The system is self-regulating through distributed decision-making. But how can untrained individuals possibly judge complex technological proposals? They demanded. Our guild system has existed for millions of years precisely because innovation requires expertise. Dr. N displayed case studies. Individually they can't, but collectively they can. We documented this repeatedly. A teenager develops a neural interface. The people who fund her aren't neuroscience experts, but they can judge her passion, her communication skills, her problem-solving approach, her willingness to learn. They're not funding perfection. They're funding potential. He showed the story of the teenage solar panel designer. She had flaws in her initial design. Professional engineers could have rejected her immediately for lacking credentials. But 3,200 humans saw something else. They saw a young person applying herself to an important problem. They funded her not because she was perfect, but because she had promise. And they were right. Her 3rd design iteration is being considered for commercial development. The corporate collective representative spoke up, its ancient corporation having existed longer than most species. This may produce quantity, but what of sustainability? How can innovation be sustained without long-term institutional commitment? Corporations provide stability across centuries. What do humans provide? Adaptability, L answered. When a human project fails, the resources are freed up for the next attempt almost immediately. When one of your corporations fails, it takes centuries to restructure. Humans iterate faster because they're not locked into institutional commitments. They can pivot, adapt, abandon failing approaches, and try new ones with minimal friction. She displayed data on human technological acceleration. Look at the trajectory. In the past 50 years alone, human innovation has increased exponentially. This coincides directly with the rise of crowdfunding and similar distributed funding models. They're not just innovating, they're accelerating. The implications settled over the chamber like a heavy weight. They were looking at a species that could potentially outpace civilizations millions of years older simply by trying more things faster and accepting failure as a natural part of progress. Observer Prime's voice carried a note of concern. This brings us to the purpose of this assembly. Should we recommend that member civilizations adopt human crowdfunding models? Could such a system work for other species? Dr. N had prepared for this question. It was the one that kept him awake during his rest cycles. That's the crucial question. Our analysis suggests that crowdfunding is not simply a funding mechanism. It's a cultural expression. It requires certain psychological and social conditions that may be uniquely human, or at least rare. He listed them on the display. First, willingness to trust strangers. Humans will give money to people they've never met based on nothing more than a written pitch and a video. Most civilizations require extensive relationship building before such trust develops. Second, acceptance of failure. Humans view failed experiments as valuable learning experiences. Most civilizations view failure as disgrace or waste. This fundamental difference in perspective shapes everything else. Third, distributed decision-making. Humans are comfortable with millions of individuals making independent choices that collectively shape outcomes. Many civilizations prefer clear hierarchies and centralized control. Fourth, rapid iteration. Humans can abandon failing approaches and try new ones with minimal social cost. Many civilizations have social and institutional structures that make pivoting difficult or impossible. Agent L added the final point. And fifth, perhaps most importantly, humans possess what they call irrational optimism. They believe that tomorrow can be better than today if enough people simply choose to make it so. They fund projects knowing they might fail because they want to live in a world where those projects succeed. Most civilizations are more pragmatic. Humans are more hopeful. The chamber fell silent as the assembly processed this information. The ambassador ran calculations. The high merchant consulted with her guild council. The representative analyzed sustainability models. Representatives from dozens of other civilizations debated among themselves. Finally, Observer Prime called for a vote. The question before us: should the consortium recommend that member civilizations adopt crowdfunding models based on the human example? The debate lasted 3 weeks, an instant in cosmic terms but an eternity by human standards. Arguments were made on all sides. Some representatives saw opportunity, others saw danger, a few saw both. When the vote concluded, the result surprised everyone. The council voted not to recommend adoption, not because the system didn't work. The data proved conclusively that it did, but because crowdfunding required something most civilizations could not replicate. Observer Prime announced the decision with somber authority. We conclude that human crowdfunding is a species-specific phenomenon rooted in psychological traits that cannot be easily transplanted to other civilizations. To adopt their methods, we would need to adopt their mindset. To adopt their mindset, we would need to become something we are not. Dr. N felt both relief and disappointment. His research had revealed a truth that would change the consortium forever, but it was a truth that most species couldn't use. The final report included his personal observation, which would later be quoted in texts across dimensions. Humanity funds innovation the way they approach most challenges, with irrational optimism, collective action unbound by traditional hierarchies, and a fundamental belief that the future can be better than the present if enough individuals simply choose to make it so. This may be their most dangerous characteristic. Not their weapons, not their tenacity, but their conviction that tomorrow's impossible is simply today's underfunded project. As the council adjourned, representatives filed out in small groups, still debating. The ambassador approached Dr. N. "Your research is sound, but you have revealed something troubling. A species that innovates this efficiently will rapidly advance beyond ancient civilizations. This could destabilize the galactic order." "I know," Dr. N replied quietly. "That's why the report includes a recommendation for continued observation." The ambassador's crystalline form shimmered with what might have been concern. Observation may not be enough. A species this adaptable could become a threat or an invaluable ally. We should consider making contact. "Too risky," Observer Prime interjected, having overheard. "Let them develop naturally. If they discover travel on their own, we'll know they're ready for contact. Until then, we watch and learn." Agent L returned to her monitoring station that evening and pulled up the latest human crowdfunding data. Something caught her attention. A new campaign had launched just hours ago. A human physicist was trying to raise money for an experiment in communication. The human didn't know such technology was possible. Their scientific understanding was centuries away from the necessary theoretical framework. They were working from pure speculation and mathematics that didn't quite add up. The campaign was already 23% funded. 2,000 humans had contributed in less than a day. The comments section was full of enthusiasm. "This is the future," wrote one backer. "Even if it fails, we'll learn something," wrote another. "Imagine if it actually works," added a third. L filed an urgent report to Dr. N. "Recommend immediate escalation. A human is attempting to develop communication technology without understanding the principles involved. They're doing it through trial and error, funded by public enthusiasm. The approach is completely backwards from standard research methodology. It should be impossible." Dr. N reviewed the report with growing alarm. "Should be impossible" is not the same as is impossible. Flag this for maximum monitoring. If humans stumble into technology through sheer persistence and optimistic funding. He didn't finish the sentence. They both understood the implications. The consortium had spent millions of years carefully developing science through rigorous theoretical research. Humans were trying to skip the theory and go straight to experimentation, funded by people who just thought it would be cool if it worked. The worst part, given everything they had learned about human innovation, it might actually succeed. L added a personal note to the classified file. Human crowdfunding may become a consortium-level concern within one generation. They don't innovate by following the established path. They innovate by trying every possible path simultaneously until one works. This approach seems chaotic and wasteful until you realize it's faster than any alternative we've documented. She watched the communication project's funding percentage climb slowly but steadily. 40 humans were backing it right now, adding their small contributions to the total. They had no idea that aliens from another dimension were watching them with a mixture of awe and concern. Dr. N submitted his recommendation to the council. Humanity requires continuous observation at the highest priority level. Their crowdfunding model has weaponized collective optimism into a competitive advantage. They turn individual dreams into collective reality with a speed and efficiency we cannot match. We must track their progress carefully. Observer Prime classified the recommendation at the highest security level. Some innovations were too dangerous to share, even among allies. The Council agreed unanimously. Humanity must be watched. Because a species that could democratize innovation didn't just innovate faster than others. They innovated in directions no one else had imagined to look. They asked questions no one thought to ask. They tried solutions no committee would ever approve. And sometimes, often enough to matter, those impossible solutions actually worked. The consortium had studied thousands of civilizations across millions of years. They had cataloged every known path to technological advancement. They had created models that predicted development with remarkable accuracy. Then they found humanity and realized they had missed an entire category of innovation. One based not on careful planning or institutional control, but on the simple human belief that if enough people thought something should exist, someone would figure out how to make it real. It was the most alien thing the consortium had ever encountered, and possibly the most powerful.